All right, hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about source reliability, which is super important when you are doing a research project. So the first thing we need to talk about is what exactly is reliability. So reliability is the trustworthiness of a source. So reliable information then comes from dependable sources, and we call sources that are dependable with trustworthy information credible. You sometimes might hear people say, what is this credibility? Or is this information reliable or credible? So what are usually the credible sources that everyone will use? So usually they are scholarly, peer-reviewed articles and books. Those things have to go through several checks for information to make sure that they are trustworthy. Sometimes the trade or professional articles or books are also very trustworthy because they again have to go through professionals who know what they're talking about in order to make them. Oftentimes we refer to magazine articles, books, and newspaper articles that are from well-established companies like National Geographic or other well-established companies that we know create reliable sources. Now, there are credible sources everywhere. You just need to make sure that you are evaluating them as you move through them. So, how do I further evaluate a source? To do that, we are going to use a checking tool called CACAP. So basically, C is the coverage and authority, and CAP is the currency, accuracy, and purpose. So we're just going to take a quick look at each of those and get some questions you might want to ask yourself to figure out if the information you're using is reliable or CACAP. So with that, let's talk about coverage. So the first thing you're going to do when you open a resource is you need to figure out if that information in there is relevant to your topic or does it meet what you need. So think about things that you might need. So for some projects, you might be asked to provide primary sources. So you need to figure out if that source that you're reading is a primary source. Was it actually created during that time period? Or does it have a primary source in it that you could use or highlight? Also, you may be looking for specific information, whether that be about a person or whether that be about a time period or other topic. Make sure that it is relevant and not something that you don't need. And then you might also want that information to corroborate some other piece of information you have learned about, which we will talk again about later after we finish CACAP. So the next thing is authority. Think about who's creating that source and do they really have the ability to tell you if that information is correct or not. You can also think about if that person has a job relative to that field or do they have training that would allow them to know the information that they're talking about. You could also see if they have some sort of contact information. Are they open to questioning? Or you might look at the URL. It should be important to note that the URL is not the best way to figure out if your source is reliable. However, most of the time, .edu, .gov are going to be more reliable, whereas .org and .com you might need to question, and .net, you might need to question just a little heavier. When you are doing these things though, please remember that people can buy whatever URL they want to have. Currency. So does that information that you're researching require updated information, and are those sources updated or are those information not really changing anymore? A lot of the times for history, what we're talking about doesn't really change as much as it used to. So we don't need to have all sorts of things that are super current. 20 years is nothing. Now, of course, there are discoveries made every day through archaeology, so that is something that we should maybe see. Has it been revised or updated or cleaned up? Are the links functional? Are they still taking care of the information on there, even if that information was written several years ago? then that brings us to accuracy. So we want to see, where are they getting their information from? Did they include sources? Did they include citations? Are they referring to other things that you have already started to look at? Or are they referring to clear evidence and making sure that evidence is accurate? Or is the information reviewed or referred? Meaning, like, is somebody going through and checking this site to make sure that it's correct? Can you verify it on another source or from personal knowledge? That is what we call corroborating. So if you can find it on multiple sources, then it is probably accurate. But sometimes you might want to check if they're citing the same source. Are those sources reliable too? And then, does the language or tone seem unbiased and free from emotion? We don't want somebody's bias to sway the information that we're talking about. And then sometimes, most of the time, people who are doing this information or misinformation might have some spelling or grammar mistakes that will kind of indicate to you that they don't necessarily know what they're talking about, or they might have some sort of spelling or grammar information that might tell you that they're actually just trying to sway you a certain way. So with that swaying a certain way, that takes us to our last thing, which is purpose. What is the purpose of the information? Is it to teach people? Is it to inform people? Is it to sell or entertain or persuade? Are they trying to make their intentions clear? If the information is just trying to sell you something or is just trying to do X, Y, or Z, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's unreliable, but you have to take what they say with a grain of salt and just keep in mind those kinds of things. So, with that being said, if you go through and nothing is passing your CACAP test, right, then you can move forward still. It's okay. Nothing is going to be perfect, but you can find the weaknesses of the sources that you've had and use other sources to fill in the gaps. So, for example, if I have a source that isn't very current, then I can make sure that my other sources are current. And that is a form of corroboration, right? If what I have isn't current, has the same information that is current, then I'm pretty safe to assume that those things are okay. If the author of my source isn't an expert, think specifically like blogs. If they are citing sources from experts like books or scholarly journals, then that is okay. Or if they're not citing sources from experts, just backing up a second, then maybe can you find the same information from an expert? And if you can, it's probably okay. And then finally, the source I used has a clear bias. Well, in that case, then maybe use a source with the other side of the bias. Make sure that you are comparing the two. What information is shared, what information is not shared, and things like that. With all that being said, this table now lives on the class website, and you can use this at any point to test your sources with CACAP. And with that, I hope you enjoyed learning about the reliability of sources. Here are my sources, and I hope you have a fantastic evening or day.